You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hey everyone! So, I recorded today's episode about a week or so ago, and since then I've been thinking about it and I started to worry about how it might come off and that there was the potential for it to be misinterpreted or heard in a certain way that I did not intend to. And so I thought I would record this little disclaimer slash explanation and add that in before the actual episode. So, what I talk about in this episode is how, in order to really change your habits, you have to actually want the change and everything that the process of change would entail. You have to actually want to become the person who lives that different life. But I don't mean to say that everyone who's struggling to change their drinking habits is struggling because they don't want the change enough and therefore it's somehow their fault that they're stuck in an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. That's not what I'm saying. I know very well that there's degrees of addiction, and for people who are physically dependent on alcohol, it can be really challenging to break that dependence, no matter how much they want to, and especially to do so without adequate support. I know that there are people who would give everything they have to be able not to drink. I know that alcohol dependence can be a matter of life and death for some people, literally. I absolutely get that. And I do not mean to minimize anyone's struggle or engage in victim blaming in any way at all. That's the last thing I ever want to do. So, this episode is not aimed at the people who are in the more extreme stages of dependence on alcohol, but rather I'm talking to the gray area drinkers, the people in the middle of the spectrum who drink regularly, even if they don't drink every day, and who are in the earlier stages of questioning their relationship with alcohol. That's who this episode is for. This episode is for the person I was 5 years ago when I could see that alcohol was a problem, but I was still hoping that I could find a way to keep drinking. And I know that I was not the only one in that situation. I know that there are many other people who are towing the line between normal drinking and problematic drinking, and who are torn between an inner knowing that something has to change and a very normal, very human reluctance to face up to that challenge. This is who I had in mind when I recorded this episode that you're about to hear. So I hope that this explanation makes sense, and I hope that you will assume good faith and good intentions on my part as you listen. And now, here's the episode. Hello, my friends. I hope everyone is doing well today, wherever you are and whatever you're up to. I want to take a step back today and talk about the idea of change. I want to talk about the question of whether it is really possible to break a habit like drinking. Most of us have spent years, if not decades, repeating the same drinking patterns, or should I say, slightly worsening drinking patterns, because as we build up a tolerance and our bodies and our brains get used to the effects of alcohol, we need more in order to feel the same effects. So you might be questioning whether you can really get to a point where you don't crave a drink every night in that witching hour after work before dinner, especially if you've been doing that for day after day, year after year. There's also the disease model of addiction, which has bled into the popular narrative of alcohol use disorder and substance use disorder, and which claims that addiction is a disease and there's no cure for it. You're born an addict and that's it. That's your lot in life. And the whole 12-step motto is built on this premise also, that some people are born addicts and they were addicts before they ever had their first sip of alcohol. And even after they stop drinking, they'll be addicts forever, which just don't get me started on how problematic and how very wrong that whole model is. It's so harmful, and there's no research to back it up, and yet it's perpetuated like the gospel. But anyway, let me not get on my soapbox right now. The point is that even if you're not into a 12-step program and don't subscribe to the idea that addiction is a disease and that you're powerless over alcohol, those messages still leak into the collective subconscious, so you and all of us, we've absorbed some of that thinking even without realizing. And then there's things like old habits die hard, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks, which imply that it's hard to break ingrained patterns of behavior, especially if they've been repeated over a long time. So, can you really change your drinking habits? The answer is yes, you can change. I promise you that it's possible. But the catch is, you have to actually want to change. This is the point where you will rush to reassure me or yourself that, of course, you want to change. You know alcohol isn't doing you any favors. You know it's a slippery slope, and the longer you keep drinking, the higher the cost to your health, your relationships, your self-respect, your future. So, because you know all of this, of course you do really want to change. And I know part of you believes that, and I believe you too, to an extent. But as a sobriety coach, here's what I see again and again. Deep down, people don't want to change. They're not ready to do the work that's required to change. They think they do, but what they actually want is to be able to keep drinking the way that they're drinking, but just not have the negative consequences. They want to keep having a few glasses of wine every night and to sleep well and wake up clear-headed too. They want to go out and drink socially as much as their friends drink, but to never say anything embarrassing and to remember how they got home and to not have a stabbing headache the next morning. They want to drink with impunity, basically, to somehow experience only the high without the low. And listen, no judgment over here. That's what I wanted too. I wanted so desperately to find a way to keep alcohol in my life. I would have done anything to find a way to keep drinking, but to somehow magically feel better even while I kept drinking. But here's the thing. Wanting to avoid the consequences of drinking is not the same thing as wanting to be a person who doesn't drink. The Venn diagram of these two things is two circles that are not even touching. It's two circles staring at each other from opposite ends of the room. Because your relationship with alcohol is not just about how much you drink and when. That's only one small part of it. A bigger part has to do with who you are around alcohol. By which I mean, in what situations do you turn to alcohol? And what are you looking for it to provide? Are there moments when you feel like you won't be okay unless you have a drink in your hand? How easy is it for you to stop after one drink? How easy is it for you to talk yourself through a craving without giving in? Can you have a good time without drinking? Can you deal with bad news without drinking? How much space does alcohol take up in your mind? Do you think about it a lot? Do you obsess about when you will be able to drink next? Are you always monitoring how much everyone else around you is drinking and whether someone has poured more in their glass than they poured in yours? Do you worry about running out of alcohol? And more broadly, do you feel like you're in control around alcohol? All these questions and more, this is what constitutes your relationship with alcohol. So when you think about changing your relationship with drinking and changing your habits, you have to think about your answers to all of these questions and then decide how you want to be able to answer them. Because here's what it means to want to change. I'm going to break it down for you. It doesn't matter if your goal is complete sobriety or you're just trying to cut back. To become a person who doesn't rely on alcohol means you have to be willing to invest the time to get to know yourself better without a filter. What do you actually enjoy doing versus what are the things that you currently tolerate because there's alcohol involved? Are there areas of your life where you feel stuck or unhappy, but you've been ignoring them and pretending everything is fine? To become a person who doesn't hide behind alcohol requires that you face yourself and your life head on and that you're honest about what's working and what's not working. Maybe you've been unhappy in your marriage for a while and you've been using alcohol to help you avoid dealing with that truth. Maybe you've lost your sense of purpose and alcohol is helping you fill the void. Maybe you suffer from chronic pain or another health condition, and alcohol has allowed you to decrease the intensity of some of those symptoms. Maybe you've been carrying around some unprocessed trauma, big T or little t, or there's some shame and regret that you've been using alcohol to help you medicate. Are you ready to own up to the truth about what's really going on in your life? To really change your relationship with alcohol also requires that you're willing to get to know your feelings and learn to process them without numbing. And I mean all your feelings. The positive, the negative, the neutral, the scary, the weird, the uncomfortable. Are you ready to be shocked by just how many feelings you actually have when you're not numbing them with booze? And there's more too. You have to learn to generate your own fun rather than relying on cocktails to entertain you. You have to come up with other ways to celebrate special occasions and good news. You have to brainstorm some other treats that you can look forward to at the end of a long day and other things to enjoy about a holiday or date night or Thursday happy hour. You also have to learn how to create intimacy and foster a connection that doesn't require a buzz. You have to redefine relaxation so that it doesn't revolve around alcohol. And you have to be willing to sometimes feel like the odd person out because everyone else around you is drinking like it's the most normal thing in the world. And you might even feel left out occasionally because there's no decent non-alcoholic options for you to choose from, or people look at you weird when you say you don't drink, or worse, they pressure you or tease you because you're not joining their tipsy shenanigans. Are you willing to open yourself up to those kinds of experiences? You also have to accept the possibility that some of your relationships will change. If you're trying to be a non-drinker or a very occasional drinker, but your partner still drinks, that might put a strain on your relationship, and you might have to renegotiate what it looks like to be together and to set boundaries around alcohol. Or you might realize that without bonding over alcohol, you and your partner are now on very different trajectories. So you might actually decide you no longer want to be together. This happens. You might lose some friendships too if it turns out that the only thing you had in common was alcohol. When you change your drinking habits, your priorities will change too. Your routines might change, how you make decisions might change, what you spend time and money on might change, whom you spend time with might change. Of course, there isn't one universal roadmap for how this journey unfolds for everyone. Your experience will be different from anyone else's experience. But the point I'm trying to get across is that it's unrealistic to expect that changing your relationship with alcohol is this subtle shift you can make quietly while everything else in your life stays the same. I mean, I suppose it's possible to do that. I guess for some people, it's really not that big a deal. They stop drinking and they carry on doing everything else exactly as it had been. But in my experience, those cases are the exception rather than the rule, so I don't want you to count on that. So if you've been trying to cut back on drinking, but you haven't succeeded so far, I want you to take a moment and look inward and be honest with yourself about what your actual goal has been so far. Have you been looking for ways to keep drinking but just avoid the consequences? Or have you actually been trying to change who you are around alcohol? Do you really want to change your drinking habits? Not, do you want to feel better after drinking, but do you want to become someone who doesn't need to drink in the first place? That's the deeper shift. And I promise you, it's possible. You don't need to be perfect or 100% confident today. You just need a willingness to be honest with yourself and a little bit of courage to try something different. And if you're not quite there yet, that's okay too. Everyone is on their own journey. For me, it was several years from the time when I knew I was drinking too much until the time I was actually ready to do something about it for real. And you too might have the awareness and still not be ready to act on it. That's okay. You're still on the path. Keep listening. Keep asking yourself the harder questions. That's how change begins. And remember that it doesn't have to be all or nothing right away. Maybe you can start small and identify one single area in your life where you want to relate to alcohol differently going forward. Maybe you start by trying to drink less at home on weeknights and see how that goes. Maybe you decide that you don't want to drink to escape a feeling, but you only drink when you're excited about the actual taste of the beverage. These are just suggestions, but think along those lines. What are some small ways you can start to show up differently and make different choices around alcohol? Play with that, because small shifts can add up to huge transformations over time too. It doesn't have to be one dramatic overnight change. Okay, friends, that's what I've got for you today. I'll leave you here. And if this episode sparked something for you or made you realize you're ready for those deeper shifts, I would love to help. You can book a free consultation call via the link in the show notes. Let's talk about where you are and where you want to go and if coaching is the right next step for you. Take good care, and I'll talk to you next week. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.